Okay, I had to pause because a helicopter was going by for some reason and my dog started barking. So I'm going to finish. We have a few more pages left in chapter 7, and Charles Wallace is talking to the thought, trying to figure out who it is. He was looking into the bright eyes. The pupils grew smaller and smaller, as though he were looking into an intensely bright light, until they seemed to close entirely, until his eyes were nothing but an opaque blue. He slipped his hand out of Meg's and Calvin's and started walking slowly toward the man on the chair. "No!" screamed Meg. "No!" But Charles Wallace continued his slow walk forward, and she knew that he had not heard her. "No!" she screamed again and ran after him. With her inefficient flying tackle, she landed on him. She was so much larger than he that he fell sprawling, hitting his head a sharp crack against the marble floor. She knelt by him, sobbing. After a moment of lying there as though he had been knocked out by the blow, he opened his eyes, shook his head, and sat up. Slowly, the pupils of his eyes dilated until they were back to normal, and the blood came back to his white cheeks. The man on the chair spoke directly into Meg's mind, and now there was a distinct menace to his words. "I am not pleased," he said to her. "I could very easily lose patience with you, and that, for your information, young lady, would not be good for your father. If you have the slightest desire to see your father again, you had better cooperate." Meg reacted as she sometimes reacted to Mr. Jenkins at school. She scowled down at the ground in sullen fury. "It might help if you gave us something to eat," she complained. "We're all starved. If you're going to be horrible to us, you might as well give us full stomachs first." Again, the thoughts coming at her broke into laughter. "Isn't she the funny girl, though? It's lucky for you that you amuse me, my dear, or I shouldn't be so easy on you. The boys I find not so nearly diverting. Ah, well, now tell me, young lady, if I feed you, will you stop interfering with me?" "No," Meg said. "Starvation does work wonders, of course," the man told her. "I hate to use such primitive methods on you, but of course you realize that you forced them on me." "I wouldn't eat your old food anyhow." Meg was still churned up and angry, as though she were in Mr. Jenkins' office. "I wouldn't trust it. Of course, our food, being synthetic, is not superior to your messes of beans and bacon and so forth, but I assure you that it's far more nourishing, and though it has no taste of its own, a slight conditioning is all that is necessary to give you the illusion that you are eating a roast turkey dinner." "If I ate now, I'd throw up anyhow," Meg said. Still holding Meg's and Calvin's hands, Charles Wallace stepped forward. "Okay, what next?" he asked the man on the chair. "We've had enough of these preliminaries. Let's get on with it." "That's exactly what we're doing," the man said, "until your sister interfered by practically giving you a brain concussion. Shall we try again?" "No," Meg cried. "No, Charles, please. Let me do it, or Calvin." But it is only the little boy whose neurological system is complex enough. If you tried to conduct the necessary neurons, your brain would explode. And Charles's wouldn't? I think not. But there's a possibility? There's always a possibility. Then he mustn't do it. I think you will have to grant him the right to make his own decisions. But Meg, with the dogged tenacity that had so often caused her trouble, continued. "You mean Calvin and I can't know who you really are?" "Oh, no, I didn't say that. You can't know it in the same way, nor is it as important to me to have you know. Ah, here we are." From somewhere in the shadow appeared 4 more men carrying dark smocks and a table. It was covered with a white cloth, like the tables used by room service in hotels, and held a metal hot box containing something that smelled delicious, something that smelled like turkey dinner. There's something phony in this whole setup, Meg thought. There's definitely something rotten in the state of Camazotz. Again, the thoughts seemed to break into laughter. Of course, it doesn't really smell, but it isn't as good as though it really did. I don't smell anything, Charles Wallace said. I know, young man, and think how much you're missing. This will all taste to you as though it were eating sand, but I suggest that you force it down. I would rather not have your decisions come from a weakness of an empty stomach. The table was set up in front of them, and the dark-smocked men heaped their plates with turkey and dressing and mashed potatoes and gravy and little green peas and big yellow blobs of butter melting in them, and cranberries and sweet potatoes topped with gooey browned marshmallows, and olives and celery and rosebud radishes, and Meg felt her stomach rumbling loudly. The saliva came to her mouth. "Oh, Jeminy," Calvin mumbled. Chairs appeared, and the four men who had provided the feast slid back into the shadows. Charles Wallace freed his hand from Meg and Calvin and plunked himself down on one of the chairs. "Come on," he said. "If it's poisoned, it's poisoned, but I don't think it is." Calvin sat down. Meg continued to stand indecisively. Calvin took a bite. He chewed. He swallowed. He looked at Meg. "If this isn't real, it's the best imitation you'll ever get." Charles Wallace took a bite, made a face, and spit out his mouthful. "It's unfair," he shouted at the man. Laughter again. "Go on, little fellow, eat." Meg sighed and sat. "I don't think we should eat this stuff, but if you're going to, I'd better too." She took a mouthful. "It tastes all right. Try some of mine, Charles." She held out a fork full of turkey. Charles Wallace took it, made another face, but managed to swallow. "Still tastes like sand," he said. He looked at the man. "Why?" "You know perfectly well why. You've shut your mind entirely to me. The other two can't. I can get in through the chinks. Not all the way in, but enough to give them a turkey dinner. You see, I'm really just a kind, jolly old gentleman." "Ha!" Charles Wallace said. The man lifted his lips into a smile, and his smile was the most horrible thing Meg had ever seen. "Why don't you trust me, Charles? Why don't you trust me enough to come in and find out who I am? I am peace and utter rest. I am freedom from all responsibility. To come in to me is the last difficult decision you need to ever make." "If I come in, can I get out?" Charles Wallace asked. "But of course, if you want to, but I don't think you will want to. If I come, not to stay, you understand, just to find out about you, will you tell us where Father is?" "Yes, that is a promise, and I don't make promises lightly." "Can I speak to Meg and Calvin alone without your listening in?" "No." Charles shrugged. "Listen," he said to Meg and Calvin. "I have to find out what he really is. You know that. I'm going to try to hold back. I'm going to try to keep part of myself out. You mustn't stop me this time, Meg." "But you won't be able to, Charles. He's stronger than you are." "I have to try." "But Mrs. Whatsit warned you." "I have to try for Meg, for Father, Meg. Please, I want to know my father." "But it isn't only Father, Meg. You know that now. It's the black thing. We have to do what Mrs. Witch sent us to do." "Calvin," Meg begged. "He's right, Meg," said Calvin, "and we'll be with him no matter what happens." "But what is going to happen?" Charles Wallace looked up at the man. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." Now, the red eyes and the light above seemed to bore into Charles, and again the pupil of the little boy's eyes contracted. When the final point of black was lost in the blue, he turned away from the red eyes, looked at Meg, and sweetly smiled. But the smile was not Charles Wallace's smile. "Come on, Meg, eat this delicious food that has been prepared for us," he said. Meg snatched Charles Wallace's plate and threw it on the floor, so that the dinner splashed about and the plate broke into fragments. "No!" she cried, her voice rising shrilly. "No, no, no!" From the shadows came one of the dark-smocked men and put another plate in front of Charles Wallace, and he began to eat eagerly. "What's wrong, Meg?" Charles Wallace asked. "Why are you being so belligerent and uncooperative?" The voice was Charles Wallace's voice, and yet it was different, too. somehow flattened out, almost as a voice might have sounded on the two-dimensional planet. Meg grabbed wildly at Calvin, shrieking, "That isn't Charles! Charles is gone!" And that is the end of chapter 7. Charles will come in the beginning of chapter 8 at the transparent column. More to come. Have a great day.